What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Total Takedown, brought to you by Pub Sports Radio, lines presented by Superbook Sports. I'm your boy Clint, and we're going to go over UFC 281. We're going to talk overs and unders, see if we can find a different way for you to make some money on this Saturday's MMA event. Go Coyotes! All right, first fight of the night, we've got Nikolai Negumereanu taking on City Kickboxing's Carlos Ulberg. Total set at 1.5. The over is juiced at Superbook Sports to minus 150. The under 1.5 is plus 130, and I like it. I like it a lot. That over 1.5 is something that I am eyeballing myself. Nikolai Negumereanu is incredibly durable. I know Carlos Ulberg's got that fast twitch reaction knockout power, but nobody's been able to crack the chin of this Nikolai Negumereanu. And Ulberg is a guy that can be had. He does leave his chin up a little bit, but it takes him slowing down before you can hurt him. It takes him gassing out before you can hurt him and get him out of there. And I think that'll take over a round to get done. You know, Nikolai Negumereanu is a guy that also likes to mix in the wrestling, the takedowns, the ground control. So even if he does try to grind on Carlos Ulberg, I think we can expect more than a round of fighting from these guys. I would be looking over 1.5 minus 150. Montel Jackson taking on Julio Arce here for the second fight of the night. Total set at 2.5. The over is minus 165. The under is plus 145. And I'm a little torn up on this one because my gut tells me that Montel Jackson is knocking out Julio Arce. I know that's like totally backwards. Julio Arce is a very popular underdog this week. He's got a much higher skill level. He's much more well-rounded. Montel Jackson really hasn't impressed against a very low level of competition, but he's knocked down 4 opponents. His last 4 opponents he's registered a knockdown against. Julio Arce is a guy who is more than willing to get into a semi-technical brawl. He's been knocked down himself and been able to rally and come back, but Montel Jackson hits like a truck, and he's notable for having some of the biggest hands in the UFC, let alone the division. I do think he'll eventually clip Julio Arce, and if he mixes in that grappling control, the ground and pound, I think there's a chance he can get him out that way. But Julio Arce is very tough to finish. So based on the numbers, I should be looking at the over 2.5 at minus 165. My gut tells me it's going under. So I'd be looking at the under 2.5 or Montel Jackson by knockout. Sungwoo Choi taking on Mike Trizano. Total set at 2.5 again. Over is minus 190. Under is plus 170. And Trizano, I don't know what to do with this guy. So I know he's more than capable of wrestling. He just never uses it with his back up against the wall, coming off a bad knockout loss. You'd think maybe he does look to implement that a little bit here, get back in the win column, do what it takes just to get his hand raised. Sungwoo Choi, he likes to get out there and bang. He's got that urgency to get back up to his feet. He's got nice long reach. He hits super hard. So this is a spot where I can definitely see violence on both sides of the fight. Trizano's probably going to look to take this thing over. Sungwoo Choi is probably going to look to take this thing under. And Trizano coming off that quick turnaround, and especially the fact that we can't trust him to go to that grappling, even though a lot of times he should. I'm going to go ahead and side with the under. I think we probably see a banger here on this one, and I'll say under 2.5 at plus 170. Zero confidence in that pick whatsoever. Silvana Gomez-Juarez taking on Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Total set again at 2.5. The over is minus 125. The under is plus 105. And both women can absolutely finish here. We've seen Silvana's arm get snapped off multiple times before. We know Karolina's decent with her jiu-jitsu and the grappling. Silvana throws absolute hammers, the haymakers that she winds up and lands. Karolina has been blunted a couple of times before. She doesn't do well with getting hit hard these days. Coming back from, all the depression and things like that, the long layoff, the retirement, you got to wonder where her mental state is going to be if she gets cracked in the face really hard. So I will pick violence here. I mean, usually when you get women this small, you're looking at a plus 150, plus 160 at minimum for this thing to go under. But the way these two fight, I think it's justified. I'll say under 2.5 plus 105 will be the pick. Otman Azaitar taking on Matt the Steamroller Frevola. Total set at 1.5 here. And I mean, these guys just set up for violence. Otman Azaitar is a one-hitter-quitter type of power puncher, and Matt Frevola gets in your face and breaks you with his pace. Wings big, wild hammers, takes you down. The ground and pound is nasty. He's got some submission offense. You got to wonder how easy it's going to be for him to get a guy like Otman down to the ground, and if he can't, what this fight looks like if Matt Frevola has a hard time getting in on those hips. The total set at 1.5. The over is minus 110. The under is pick'em price tag, minus 110 as well. And I mean, the easy answer is under, right? The easy answer is under because Otman Azaitar should be able to nuke Matt on his way in, or if he doesn't, then Frevola doesn't usually take long to get people out of there once he gets them to the floor. So I will side with violence. I'll say under 1.5, minus 110. Wellington Turman taking on Andre Petrowski. Total set at 1.5 for this one. Over is minus 140. The under is plus 120. Petrowski is a guy that has big time submission upside, wings big clubbing power punches, tries to close the distance, wrestle you down to the mat. Wellington Turman, BJJ black belt. He's going to have the striking advantage, although he's nothing to write home as far as his power or his striking acumen goes. If this is a striking matchup, then Wellington Turman probably just kind of outpoints Andre Petrowski. I'm not expecting much from either of them. But I don't think the fight's going to go that way. Petrowski usually wings those bombs trying to get the fight to the mat, and then both of them are solid once it gets down there. Whether it's ground and pound, whether it's somebody snatching an arm or a neck, I think both these guys definitely have the capability of finishing. But I also think it's going to take one of them getting a little roughed up and tired to get there. I'll say over 1.5, minus 140. I think we get into the second round here on this fight. I think once one of these guys slows down or starts to make a mistake or starts to break a little bit, the other one can get the finish. But I don't know that it's going to happen in the very first round. So I'll say over 1.5. Molly McCann taking on Erin Blanchfield. Total at 2.5 here. This is more of your classic women's MMA. The total is over 2.5, minus 200. Under 2.5 is plus 175. And I will side with that over. Erin Blanchfield does have the ability to submit her opponents. We've seen that before. She's got that chain wrestling offense ability. Molly McCann, she's got those hammers, the spinning elbows. We've seen what she can do in this weight class. She hits like an absolute truck. But I think Erin Blanchfield is intelligent and durable enough to go to the grappling here in this fight. Molly McCann may be able to stuff some of these takedowns. Once she gets put on the ground, she may be able to survive in those exchanges. I don't think Erin Blanchfield is going to just maul her, TKO her, or grab her back and grab a neck, that kind of thing. A lot of people think Erin's going to just run through Molly. I think she wins. I don't know if she runs through. So I'm thinking it's more of a Blanchfield by decision type of situation. If you're looking for a finish, the props are juicy on both sides here on this one, but I know both these women are so tough that I think we see the judges' scorecards here. I'll say over 2.5, minus 200. Ryan Superman Spann taking on Dom Reyes. Total set at 1.5. The over minus 105. Slight dog money here on the over 1.5. And minus 115 on the under 1.5. I could be tempted either way on this one, and I know that sounds crazy. Ryan Spann is a one-round fighter, essentially. He likes to knock his opponents to the ground, grab that neck, choke them out, ground and pound if he's got the availability to. He also knows how to fumble the bag. Once he gets his opponent hurt, he lets them off the hook sometimes. He gets over-aggressive. He makes mistakes, and his opponents come back and end up finishing him. He's a good hammer and a bad nail. That usually lends itself to early finishes. Dominick Reyes, old Dominick Reyes, he was an early finisher as well. He's a guy that likes to get in there and bang, wing those left high kicks and that left hook. But he's now talking about being more defensively sound. He's coming off 3 losses in a row, 2 of those by finish. He's looking to get back in the win column, and I don't know that he cares whether or not it's an early highlight reel knockout. He just wants to get his hand raised. So because of that, it puts a tiny question in my head as to whether or not this fight is going to finish quick, because I think Dom Reyes is probably going to need to get a little bit of time, get his feet wet, look to engage in the grappling, keep the distance, avoid some of the power strikes of Spann, and then look to counter. If he lands that big counter left hook, I think this thing probably ends pretty quickly. But if Ryan Spann tries to have the same kind of technical approach, we could squeeze over this 1.5. I'm expecting violence. I think this fight finishes under 1.5, but I wouldn't be shocked if it squeezes over that 1.5 mark. So just be careful. I will say under 1.5, minus 115. It's hard to go against that number with these types of big boys and the power they bring to the table, but I'm not all the way in on it. Renato Moicano taking on Brad Riddell. Another 2.5 for us. The over is plus 100 even money. The under 2.5 is minus 120. And I can understand the idea of violence here in this spot. Renato Moicano's been broken. He's been knocked out. He's been hurt several times before. He's also a BJJ black belt. We just saw Brad Riddell get clubbed and subbed in his last fight. So there's definitely an opportunity for both guys to get the finish in this spot. However, Brad Riddell is really solid on top of his opponents. When he mixes in the wrestling and the takedowns, he does a really good job of staying safe from that position, not overextending. And you end up seeing Brad Riddell in these close but clear type of decisions where he beats up his opponents, he takes them down, he mauls them on the ground, but he does everything while kind of mitigating damage to himself. That's kind of the fight I'm expecting to see here. I actually think the over 2.5 at plus 100 is probably the way this one ends up going. Brad Riddell by decision, maybe a sneaky way to kind of up the price tag there on that prop if you're looking for some more juice. Claudio Puelles taking on Dan Hooker, maybe the most interesting fight on the card this week outside of, obviously the title fights. Big questions around both these guys. Claudio Puelles, the knee bar king, and then Dan Hooker, everyone wondering just how shot he actually is, how much durability he's got left to offer. Total set at 2.5. Under is minus 150. The over is plus 130. And I would like to look at that under 2.5. Claudio Puelles, when he wins his fights, it's by sub. He likes to body kick these people, take them down, grab a knee, grab a leg, grab an ankle, snap something off, and get his win. Dan Hooker's a guy that has long legs. He's given up those positions before, but he's incredibly hard to actually submit. It's mostly big power punchers that take out Dan Hooker. And Claudio Puelles, he's not the level of grappler we've seen Dan Hooker lose to. I'm sorry. I know his knee bars are on point, but he's not the kind of wrestler it takes to get those dominant positions on Dan Hooker, and I don't think he's the kind of power striker it takes either. Dan Hooker has some submissions of his own. He's got knees. He's got elbows. He is a nasty striker. I will say under 2.5 because I think both guys will have enough opportunities to finish here in this spot. I like violence. Chris Grutzmacher taking on Frankie Edgar, another 2.5 for us here. The over 2.5 is -160. The under 2.5 is +140. And I know the storyline here is Frankie Edgar's durability is the problem, right? Frankie Edgar is the guy who's just got nothing left in the tank, and Chris Grutzmacher is going to knock him out. I don't know that that's actually all that true. Chris Grutzmacher is a decision machine. He's a leg kicker, and when you don't succumb to those leg kicks, he won by spinning back fist in his last fight, something nobody saw coming. The leg kick TKO is really the only way he finishes people. And Frankie Edgar's fought a guy like Jose Aldo multiple times. He knows how to handle those kinds of leg kicks. Chris Grutzmacher also has been known to give up some takedowns and spend some time on the ground. Frankie Edgar is still a absolutely stellar wrestler. If he mixes in that grappling, mixes in those takedowns, the pace of this fight really could get slowed down a whole lot. I think the over 2.5 is kind of the way to go. This seems like a spot where Frankie Edgar, getting a giant step down in competition, should be able to at least survive. Now, Chris Grutzmacher may still get his hand raised. Frankie might not get to ride off into the sunset here on Saturday, but I think he can make it to the bell. I'll say over 2.5, -160. Michael Chandler taking on Dustin Poirier in your third spot here. What is that? Highlight is the word that I'm coming to here, but that's not right. I don't know. It's a good fight. Over 1.5, -135. Under 1.5, +115. You know, Michael Chandler's been on record recently this week talking about how he needs to get the win. He doesn't care how. And Dustin Poirier has also been on record saying that Michael Chandler knows if he comes out looking for a brawl that he's going to get ended. And deep down, he knows that. He's playing the mind games here. You know, Michael Chandler is more than capable of going 15 minutes. We've seen it in Bellator. He's a guy that's done that before, but over in the UFC, he's been more of this quick twitch, knock him out early type of fighter. I don't know if he wants to engage with Dustin Poirier in a brawl. And if he has a more technical fight, if he actually chooses to mix in some of his wrestling and his grappling, he's got a much, much better chance of success, in my opinion, than just trying to knock out Dustin, who, let's face it, almost nobody puts this guy away early. He can, but it all comes down to what the game plan is and how Michael Chandler approaches this fight on Saturday. I'm going to say over 1.5. I tried to do this when Dustin Poirier fought Conor McGregor, thinking these guys will give each other a little bit of respect with the power on the other side of the cage, and they won't just engage in a brawl right away. They'll feel each other out. There'll be some takedowns. There'll be some wrestling mixed in, and we'll squeeze over that 1.5 before somebody dies. And it looked like I had the right read on the fight, and then Conor McGregor's leg snapped in half. So I think I need to go back to the well here. Very similar matchup. If Michael Chandler decides to get that grappling going, especially, I think we'll get over that 1.5 mark before somebody gets taken out. I know it's scary. It's terrifying with the way these two guys go, but I think over 1.5 is the move at -135. Weili Zhang taking on Carla Esparza in your co-main event. Total set at 4.5. The over 4.5 is +110. The under 4.5 is -130. Super binary fight. Carla Esparza, she's only got one finish in like the last 20 years. So granted, it was impressive, but I don't think she's going to be ground and pounding Weili Zhang. That's just me. Weili Zhang, on the other hand, big, powerful knees, crazy strong striker, explosive, athletic, headhunter. Like, she is going to be the one that forces this thing under if it gets there. On top of that, she's got some submission chops on her, so Carla's got to watch her neck. But it's easy. Carla's going over, Weili's going under. It's hard for this thing to imagine going any other way unless we get a Rose Namajunas staring contest, and Weili Zhang ain't having that, let me tell you. So I kind of like the under 4.5, mostly because I'm siding with Weili Zhang in this spot. I think the improvements that she should have made in the offseason at this point should come bear fruit. She's so much physically stronger than Carla Esparza, working out where she does over at Fight Ready MMA. You would hope she gets the wrestling chops where they need to be so she can be more effective in this fight. I'll say under 4.5, -130, but at the same time, don't be shocked if Cookie Monster just comes out and does the damn thing again, because I mean, she's got the belt for a reason, folks. I know you hate to see it, but she absolutely does, and she's earned it. Main event time. Alex Pereira taking on Israel Adesanya. 4.5 total here. Over 4.5 minus 125. The under 4.5 plus 105. And I've been struggling with this total here all day, folks. All day. Because Israel Adesanya is the classic fighter that will hype his fight up. He'll talk about blood and guts and elbows and, leaving people in a pile. And then he goes out and kicks someone's thigh for 25 straight minutes. You can just never tell. Like, that's just Israel Adesanya. Now, Alex Pereira, I think he's going to do his usual thing. He's going to stomp forward. He's going to look for that big left hand. If he lands that bomb, nobody's taking that thing. Like, Izzy will go down if Alex Pereira lands that left hand. So I do think the under has a whole lot of merit simply from the Alex Pereira side. And Israel Adesanya, we've seen him as a counter striker. He can avoid his opponent's shots, step, and land those big counters. I mean, when he took the belt from Rob Whittaker, we saw exactly what he was capable of. And nobody's looked like they were going to knock out Rob recently since then. So Izzy's still got some power, even though he doesn't usually choose to fight that way. There's a lot going into this one. There's history between these guys. Israel Adesanya wants to end Alex Pereira and put this storyline to rest. Does that mean he wants a dominant 25 minutes? Or does that mean he wants to prove a point and put him down for good? I don't know. You'd have to ask Izzy. And of course, he's being all cryptic and shit. We have no idea what the game plan is coming into this fight from Israel Adesanya. I'm going to say under 4.5 at plus 105. I think that's the way to go. You encompass having Alex Pereira landing that left-hand nuke of his and being able to get the job done that way. That's the main way this fight goes under. But if he can't get that, Israel Adesanya can still bail us out. There's a chance that Israel Adesanya can knock Alex Pereira out. Far less likely, I would think. But it's not in a zero probability option there. So I will say under 4.5 at plus 105 to get it done in the main event. That's the total takedown, folks. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. We'll see you tomorrow for the Sharp Action Report as well as the undefeated post-weigh-in show. Good luck on all your degenerate action and let's roll.